Everybody, Phil Snyder with GunClassUtah.com. Hey, today we've got another awesome video. It's part of a 6-video series on the Utah Concealed Firearms Permit Course refresher for 2024. So this will be video number 4. I will have 2 more videos to complete the series, which you can find in a playlist on the channel. Utah Concealed Firearms Permit Course 2024 refresher, I believe it is. So there will be 6 videos with, maybe another couple of videos that are very short that supplement the course. But to get the full course, this would be something that you would get if you paid for it in person. But it won't suffice to certify you to get your concealed firearm license for the first time. But if you're just looking for a refresher, I've got you current through May 1st of 2024. Today's video is going to be on Utah federal and state of Utah concealed carry laws. So this is going to cover not only where you can and cannot carry, but also other gun rights and gun mandates and restrictions and laws that affect your constitutional rights. There's a website called le.utah.gov. That's limaecho.utah.gov. If you want to go there and click the code button, and then there should be a search box. And if you want to verify these statutes for yourself, you can certainly do that. But the first one we want to talk about is Utah Title 76-10-500. It says the Utah legislature has exclusive jurisdiction on firearms law unless approved otherwise by the legislature. I really like how Utah has done that. Some states, like Oregon, for example, each individual county can make their own individual gun mandates and laws, and so it can be very confusing in a state like that when you're crossing cities and counties to keep track of that. But thank goodness in our great state of Utah, the legislature has exclusive jurisdiction over all gun laws. Utah Title 76-10-511 says the permit is not needed if you just want to have a gun in your residence, your temporary residence, or your real property, or in your vehicles. For example, camp tents and trailers and motels and things like that are considered your home when you are away from home and staying in those other places. Open carry is legal in the state of Utah for everybody that is at least 18 years of age or older. So you may be asking yourself, well, why would I want to open carry? Well, there are legitimate reasons for doing so. Number one, maybe you're going through a walk, or you're going through a walk in the backcountry. Those 4-legged predators, those 2-legged predators can come out pretty quick and be on top of you, and open carry is a much quicker draw, maybe half a second versus, 3 to 6 seconds under clothing, something like that. Also, some states require you to open carry if you are under 21 years old. And there are other states like Oregon, if you don't have a permit, and your Utah permit is not honored by Oregon, they will only allow you to open carry. Also, I like to open carry, and I typically do on range days when I go there with students to shoot, or in the concealed firearms classes, I will open carry because, we do drawing techniques and things like that. And, it also keeps my awareness skills sharp. You got to have eyes in your back of your head when you're open carrying, and you got to have the right temperament to open carry, because people will mess with you and they'll make smart aleck comments and stare you down and things like that. And you got to have that in a good retention holster that locks into place, and have some retention techniques in the event somebody does try to grab that gun out of your holster or something like that. And it is your constitutional right. As we said earlier, you only need to be 18 to open carry. However, if you are under 21 years old in the state of Utah, the chamber of the semi-automatic must be empty. The barrel, the chamber, that has to be empty for those 18 to 20-year-olds. And you can have a loaded magazine in the gun. And that would be considered by the state of Utah to be an unloaded gun, because the law says in Utah, if the gun has one in the firing position, or if it's in a condition to where one mechanical action would cause it to fire, that would be a loaded gun. And so that's why we can have a loaded magazine in the semi-automatic gun, because you would need to one action to cycle that slide back, and the second action of that trigger pull would have those two mechanical actions. And double action revolvers, that's a little bit different. If you were under 21 years old and you wanted to carry that revolver, first of all, you would need to know the direction of the cylinder rotation when you cock that hammer or pull that trigger. For example, one of my double action revolvers, that cylinder rotation goes counterclockwise. And so it would make that 5-shot revolver a 3-shot revolver to comply with carry laws if it was requiring you to have it unloaded when you were under 21 years old. And so if I were to set that up, I would obviously need that chamber position empty and that one immediately next to it, because of that trigger pull. If there was one loaded next to it, it would cause it to fire. Also, if you're under 21 in Utah, you cannot carry in child care facilities and preschool grounds and K through 12 schools or colleges and universities if you don't have the gun license, the provisional license to do that. Utah has constitutional carry if you're unrestricted from possessing and owning a firearm by state and federal law. You can carry with some restrictions if you're over 21 years old, and it can be fully loaded. And we did another video on that, so we're not going to get into the details. Utah has 2 concealed firearms permits. We have the standard and we have the provisional. The standard, if you go to bci.utah.gov and go on their website under the concealed firearms section, and then you choose a tab that says states that honor the permit, you're going to see a blue and a green chart, and the green is the standard, and that is for everybody that is over 21 years old. And the permit, all it allows you to do is to carry a concealed handgun, and states that it has reciprocity with that permit in your vehicles and out in public. That's all it does. And currently at this time it's 37 states. And I believe the first video that we've got covers which states they are. Also allows you to carry in K through 12 schools and colleges and universities. Long guns are also permitted that are loaded in your vehicles if you have that standard permit. And that is only for the standard, not the provisional. Always keep your address on file and keep it current with BCI. When your gun permits come up for renewal, you should get a renewal notice in the mail if you've kept that address on file. Also, it's very important to keep the address on file in case, in the event that they send an administrative notice about your permit. For example, if you got a DUI or something like that, BCI would get wind of that because your fingerprints are turned on, and they would send you a suspension notice or revocation, something like that. So that's why it's always important to keep that address on file, because BCI does not forward mail, and so you're just kind of shit out of luck if you don't have your address current. The provisional firearm permit for those 18 to 20-year-olds in Utah: no K through 12 schools, no carry into K through 12, no carry into preschools or child care facilities. Everything else is pretty much the same as the standard. And if you're a Utah resident, the provisional is valid in 19 states at this time as of October 2024. And those 19 states the provisional is allowed in and you have reciprocity with are Alabama, Arkansas, Georgia, Idaho, Indiana, Maine, Michigan, Mississippi, Missouri, Montana, Nevada, North Carolina, North Dakota, Ohio, Oklahoma, South Dakota, Tennessee, Vermont, and Wyoming. Constitutional carry, we touched on it just a few minutes ago. Again, you can carry with a loaded gun in public places. However, no federal parks without the permit, no school zones or within 1,000 feet of a school, unless you're in your vehicle or in your home. So, for example, if you're walking on foot through a school zone or within 1,000 feet of a school under constitutional carry, that would be against federal law unless you had the Utah concealed firearm permit. Remember, all the Utah concealed firearm permit allows you to do is to have a reciprocity agreement with those other states. All the laws are going to be different, and it's your responsibility to know what those laws are. Utah Title 76-10-523, as amended May 5th, 2021. Weapons laws, exempt persons. Local and federal law enforcement, judges, court commissioners, federal firearm license dealers transporting firearms for business, and those that are issued protective orders are exempt from current weapons laws under this statute. These are exemptions. If you have a protective order, you could apply for a temporary protective order. Not a lot of domestic violence victims are aware of that. And I believe that is good for 60 days. Utah Title 76-10-527, carrying while intoxicated, as amended May 3rd, 2023. It is illegal to carry a firearm, concealed or open carry for that matter, when you are legally intoxicated in the state of Utah that is 0.05 BAC or higher. And I commonly see this in the courts. I work as a court bailiff and security officer in the Salt Lake Justice Courts. And, typically people get a DUI, they get an arrest for that, and they're carrying a firearm on them, and then the officer tacks on that additional Class B misdemeanor when that breath test or that blood test comes out at 0.05 or higher. There are legal defenses to this charge of carrying while intoxicated. If you are in your home when this happens, or those temporary homes that we talk about, or if you're in another person's home with their approval to be carrying, or if you're acting under lawful self-defense under Utah Title 76-2-402, or, this surprises me, if you are under the influence of medical cannabis and you are using it as consistent with state law regarding the use of that with that medical card, you're using that as prescribed. Also, if you are on other prescription medication and you are using it as prescribed and you are not a danger to yourself or others in possession of that firearm while under that doctor's care and under the influence of those prescription drugs, those would be defenses. To carry inside of a bar is not illegal in the state of Utah. A lot of states it is, but in our state, it's not illegal in itself. That is considered private property. Now, a bar can prohibit you from carrying if they notice that you have a gun printing under your clothes or something like that. And they could deny entry, obviously, but, there's no law on the books that, specifically says that you cannot carry into a bar. Not a good idea, though, right? Secured areas, Utah Title 53-5-710. Airport is a secured area. Now, I did do a video of a 2024 update on airport carry laws, and it goes over how to actually pack the gun if you're going to travel and it's going to go into your luggage. No carry-on of firearms. So look at that video. That is one that's, I think, 7 minutes long. I did add that to the playlist because of the updates to the laws. Also, secured areas of mental health facilities. For example, in my crisis intervention training in my law enforcement job, I toured the state hospital, and there were certain areas of that state hospital, mental hospital, where those were restricted areas, and those signs are required. Correctional facilities, jails, prisons, court buildings, law enforcement buildings, Utah Tax Commission, things like that. Those are called secured areas, and the law actually requires one sign, no weapon sign, or no ammunition and knives and things like that, whatever that secured facility wants to keep out. one sign is required to post in a prominent location at the entrance to the secured facility. And so if you walked into that secured facility and there was no sign, you would have a defense to that charge. I actually worked at a court in Salt Lake County. I won't mention which one it is, and I started working there, and this court had actually been there for several years, and they didn't have any no weapon signs, right? When you walked into the building. And so, I quickly brought that to the court's attention, and they got signs out there now. Houses of worship and private residences, not businesses. Houses of worship and private residences can forbid guns from being onto their property, and that would be an infraction. That would be something that you would get like equivalent to like a speeding ticket for, to be in violation of that, but no risk of jail time on infractions. And BCI's website, actually, there are 3 religious entities that have published public notice of no firearms on the premises, and that would be the LDS Church, Western Presbyterian, and Layton Presbyterian. But BCI has that on their website. These entities can also give notice verbally, or they can publish something in the newspaper, or they can have a policy on their website, or they can have signs. It doesn't matter. Notice can be given in either way in that houses of worship and private residence. State buildings are okay, except for maybe the tax commission, and that would be a secured area, and they're going to have signs out there. But just because it's a Utah state building doesn't ban firearms unless it's posted as a secured area. Carry into federal facilities is unlawful even if you have a permit. For example, the United States Post Office, that's a federal building. The IRS building, the FBI building, things like that. Even the grounds of the building. So let's use the post office. You go there to drop off a letter, you park in the post office parking lot, you leave your gun in your car to go drop off a package. You're still in violation of federal law because you are on the property. So the workaround, I go to the post office all the time and I'll park out on the street right out in front of the post office. That's a state highway. Or you could park into a private parking lot that's not on the federal government property, and you will be fine. It is against federal law to carry onto Indian reservation land without permission of tribal leadership. And it's my understanding, I had some Navajo that attended my Utah concealed carry class, and they said, you want to check with them, obviously, but they were telling me that the Navajo leadership will allow carry onto the reservation if you have a permit. And that's just something that I heard. I wouldn't rely on that, but that is what I was told. So you may want to check, because the tribes, to my understanding, have different laws on that. Utah Title 34-45-103, effective May 13, 2014. It says employers and private property owners can restrict entry into workplaces with your guns. However, they can't forbid you from keeping your gun in your car if it's locked up and out of view. They can also tell you where to park if it's reasonably close to where you will be and it's safe. Employers may ban firearms onto the property in the vehicles if they're going to be left there, but they have to provide by law an alternate place to park at no charge, or provide a monitored storage area parking lot. Utah Title 34-45-106. The Utah Attorney General can get involved with a lawsuit if you request it on behalf of the gun owner that needs assistance and an employer that's not complying with this statute. 34-45-04. Private property owners in compliance with the above are not liable for civil action resulting in acts with firearms allowed on the property unless use of the firearm involves the property owner. 34-45-107. Exemptions to the private property carry with guns are owner-occupied single-family apartment units or home rental units, school premises, governmental entities, or religious organizations acting on behalf of the employer. Those would be exemptions to these protections that you have. Utah Title 53-5A-103, as amended May 3rd, 2023. Private property owners are not civilly or criminally liable if they allow a firearm possessor onto the property, if that person can lawfully possess the firearm, unless that property owner solicits, requests, commands, encourages, or intentionally aids the firearm possessor in discharging the firearm while on the occupant's property for a purpose other than lawful defense of an individual on the property. Here's some federal weapons laws, Title 18, Chapter 44 through 922. Unlawful acts. The first one is straw purchase. A straw purchase occurs when a person makes a false or oral written statement or misrepresents identification when making an FFL gun purchase. For example, unlawful users with medical cards that state they are not using marijuana when they are. This conflicts with federal law. And I know there's been a lot of constitutional challenges on that, but for now, that's the way it stands until they decriminalize marijuana at the federal level. That's going to interfere with you legally buying a handgun under federal law. Also, commonly, if you make a false statement when you fill out that 4473 form with the gun dealer, and you make any other false statement, or let's say that you buy a gun for your roommate that cannot legally possess a firearm, those are all federal felonies, and they're probably going to get you about 10 years in prison and some very hefty fines. Also, make sure if you ever sell a firearm, private sale, you sell to a resident of your state. And I would document that sale very well if you're going to do that. And the only exceptions would be active duty members of the U.S. military, and they can show you PCS orders that they are stationed in your state, and that would be an exception to that. Always a good idea to document the sale with an ID or driver's license. BCIutah.gov also has a section on their website where you can verify serial numbers of guns before you buy them to check them for stolen, which I really like. And you can also verify whether somebody has a valid Utah concealed firearm permit or not, whether that's a resident or a non-resident. A lot of private gun sales, gun owners will only sell to somebody that has a valid concealed firearm permit, and so that's a good resource to check that. Law enforcement is actually not instructed to confiscate those firearms permit unless they have been revoked status. And so it's a good idea to check, because just because somebody has the card and it shows current doesn't necessarily mean it's valid. Federal law says it's unlawful to transport loaded firearms unless it's otherwise acceptable by local or other city or local law. For example, if you have a concealed firearm permit and it's honored in that state that you're traveling through, that would be okay. But if you did not have a firearm permit and you didn't have some other legal exception under some other state or local law, you would have to carry that gun to be in compliance with federal law. It would have to be completely empty. The magazines would need to be empty, and the ammunition would have to be in a separate container. And the empty gun and the empty magazines would need to be in a locked container if it was in the passenger area of the vehicle. If you didn't have a locked container, you could put it in the trunk of the vehicle and being in compliance with the federal law. That concludes the laws of carry. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like and subscribe and hit that notification bell, and you will get notifications. We're only not quite 200 subscribers. We haven't been doing this very long, but please share if you think this information is helpful, so we can keep providing content other than just the standard concealed carry stuff. I'd like to do some more videos on traffic stops and your legal rights with police and anything else. If you've got a video that you'd like me to do something on, comment, let me know what it is. We'd be happy to help you.